Okay, this is Jimmy Jive, and you're listening to Motor City Rock Talk. Today, my guest is a bassist slash lead vocalist for a psychedelic 60s type progressive rock. It's hard to describe. It's some really, really interesting music. Been around for a while. Have P and a full-length album that's out on Spotify. It's been out for a few years. Really good stuff. The name of the band is Blue Black Hours. They're, again, a very interesting name unto itself. And my guest today is John Spurrier. Hey, John, how you doing, brother?
Great. How you doing?
Good. All right, let's start with a little background. Tell me a little bit about where you're from originally, maybe some of your earliest influences as far as your music.
Well, I pretty much grew up in Sterling Heights from the age of 8 until I was 21. Then I moved out. Musically, well, I grew up in the probably 70s and 80s, and my parents were kind of like neo-hippies. I remember being a kid, and there was parties at the house all the time. Every weekend, a bunch of long-haired rockers would be hanging out, doing what long-haired rockers do. I was like 3 years old at the time, and I loved it. It was just like my dad he always had a cool stereo system and was into good music, and was into Pink Floyd, Sabbath, Zeppelin, Kiss. King Crimson, bunch of cool bands, Uriah Heep, Deep Purple. So all that was a huge influence on me growing up. And that's where I got my first introduction into the psych, prog, heavy rock world. So from there, 80s came around, and that's when I started playing guitar when I was 14. Always into music. I was always just, anywhere we'd go, I'd just go out in the car a lot of times, and, parents would give me the keys to the car, so I'd go in there and just jam out, while we're like visiting relatives and whatnot, keep me occupied, so I wouldn't get bored, and that was great. I was like, I get to rock the stereo out in the car, So I started playing guitar when I was 14. Actually, I took it back. I started taking lessons when I was 10, but I was lazy and didn't do it. And then when I was 14, we were going through a lot of like family turmoil. I was hanging out at my grandfather's house, and he had a guitar, and I was bored, and I was like, "Hey, can I play your guitar?" He's like, "Sure." So I took the chord book out, started learning a few chords. That was it. I was hooked after that. I just started teaching myself, playing by ear a lot. Took a few lessons here and there later on, just mainly just self-taught.
So when did you start playing bass then? I mean, I knew obviously still played. Yeah,
that's funny. Interesting story. There was a few years right after high school where I got really involved in the church. I always say this, after high school, things happen, like you either like go to college, join the army, or have a family, or you get hurt or something.
Right.
You're trying to find yourself, right?
Yeah.
So I got involved in that for about 4 years, pretty heavy. As a matter of fact, to the point where I threw away all my albums, and, because it was like the devil's music or whatever, right?
Wow.
Yeah, I actually threw them away. I had a cousin who lived out in California at the time, and she was really involved with the rock scene out there, KNAC radio. And she'd always try to get me out there, and she would send me pictures, photographs, and autographs from bands that she was hanging with and everything. Like she'd sent me like Polaroids of Motley Crue back when they were just playing like the Whiskey and everything.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. So I threw all that stuff away. It was stupid.
There's a song about walking down alleys. It's called Alley Walk.
was invited to go to the Metallica after party for Injustice for All. She's like, yeah, if you can get a plane out here, come on out. You know, you can go to the party. And I'm like, really? And then Metallica was my favorite band right out of high school. I mean, well, for years, actually, you know, before that, too. But, and for some reason, I didn't go. I was just thinking, I can't do that. So I never went. It was stupid, you know. So she sent me back pictures and autographs from James and Lars. And yeah, I threw all that stuff away. It was really stupid. Got away from rock music for like 4 years. And I was listening to nothing but like church music. That's all I was doing. You know, I was in this church band, do like a little church band. They already had too many guitar players. And I was like, well, you know what? I could now just play bass. And at the time, I was college, and I was taking this course called, I don't know, it was one of those courses to find out what you want to do in life, whatever. And we had a talent show we were doing. And I was really into working out at the time, still am. Well, maybe I could do like a training video or something, you know, and I was like, I don't know about that. I go, I know, just to get the easy grade. We were doing the performance at the Macomb Center for Performing Arts, which is a great, you know, sound venue. Yeah, that's where our presentation for this talent show thing was at, and that's where the Detroit Symphony Orchestra records at. So anyways, like, I go, I know, I'll borrow my buddy's bass. He had this like lime green Warlock bass. I was like, dude, can I borrow your bass? You know, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to go up there and just do a bass solo. And I wasn't even a bass player, but I was like, I'm going to work out a bass solo. And did this thing, class, and did this bass solo. And I was hooked that night. And after the show was over, some people come up to me and like, hey, man. You know, one guy was like, do you want to start a band? And all this stuff. And here's my number. And I was like, oh, okay. So after the class was over, I just ended up hanging out for like an hour and a half. And I asked the janitor, I was like, hey, do you mind if I just sit here and play for a little while? And he's like, no, go ahead. Because the acoustics were so great, and I was just in this, you know, elated state, and I'm like, all right. So I just jammed for like an hour and a half just in that auditorium by myself. Yeah, I was kind of hooked after that, and so then I bought an acoustic bass guitar and started playing in the church band. And I just found that bass, you know, I always loved I actually started as a drummer kid, you know, just messing around.
Yeah.
But I always was like, the guitar was my thing. Kid, I was always like, you know, the guitar. But then when I discovered bass, it was like this new world. It was like a cross bridge between drums and the guitar, the rhythm aspect of the drums, but with the melodic aspect of guitar, which I kind of play bass more in a sense like the guitar player in certain aspects, you know, than maybe your typical bass player would. You know, I started off with a pick because that's all I knew for a while, and then accidentally transferred over to using my fingers because there was a point where I was living somewhere and I couldn't find a guitar pick anywhere. So I was like, well, I'll just learn to play with my fingers. So I started messing around with that a little bit. And the band, before Blue Black Hours, was a band called Think, and which is the same guitar player from Blue Black Hours. Him and I, we've been together since '93. Playing music. Yeah, we started this band called Think. Has a whole story with that, but trying to stick with the whole bass thing for a minute. So yeah, we started playing bass there. You know, we had a singer and all that, and I played with a pick for years. And then once that band ended, you know, the singer left, and they were always trying to get me to sing. And you know, we ended up just looking for a singer, and we found a guy, and it worked out really well. And then after he left, that's kind of when Blue Black Hours started forming, and I was like, well, screw it, I'll just sing. You know, so I decided to start singing, which is really funny because I found it easier to sing, play finger picking than I did with a pick. For some reason, like when I played with a pick, I always wanted to note the way I was singing it. You know, which I like the sound of the pick. Sometimes I use it. It was really weird because when I played with my fingers, for some reason there was a disconnect, and I could separate what I was singing rhythmically than what I was doing on the bass, so I didn't have that problem anymore, which is really kind of strange. So that's how the whole bass thing started. You know, I just found my voice with it. I felt like that was my most expressive instrument, you know, besides singing too. I really liked the bass. There's just something magical about it. I always just felt like I could just click right in with it.
I noticed in some of the videos I've seen of the band that use effect pedals. Have you always used effect pedals as far as the bass? Because a lot of bass players don't.
Yeah, I like to use them, as spicing. I don't know if spicing is not a word. Spicing things up with it. Yeah, I like to throw in, you know, different things, wah, pedal, delay, phaser, whatever.
Does that also help being, you know, that band with a three-piece, obviously? Does that help, in your mind, fill the sound in a little bit? Because, like, you know, when a guitarist goes into a solo or whatever, you know, a lot of time with three-piece, they have that lull because the bass being a lower tone instrument. Do the effects seem to help as far as that, or is it just create a new sound that seems to blend well with the music that you were doing?
Pretty much the effects kind of just like put in where they needed to be. Never really used them much, like just certain parts of the song, but primarily it was just overdrive my bass, so it was more of a fuzzy tone. Like I always liked tone of Felix Popularity from Mount Geezer Butler, like that kind of fuzzy, overdriven bass tone. I've always really dug that. Cliff Burton. But really, it's kind of using sparingly, but primarily it was just keeping an overdriven tone, slightly overdriven. That kind of filled with the sound. The guitar player, he's got a very interesting style. He kind of plays around the way I play, and he's very chordal. He uses a lot of chords. His big influences are like Alex Lifeson, guys like that. The guy from Marillion, I don't know if you know Marillion or not.
Oh, absolutely.
Robert Fripp. He's
classic.
I think David Gilmour. So he's had a lot of his influence from that. So we always worked really well together. But he uses a lot of effects. His pedal board's pretty monstrous.
Yeah, guitarists usually do. Speaking of which, when did the band start? Where is the band out of? What area specific is the band from?
See, it started, Think is where it's kind of all began, where Scott and I met. It was a very, very serendipitous thing how that happened. Very strange. I've had a lot of that going on through the years with that. That's a chapter in a book, probably 5 chapters. That one started back in like 93. Him and I was just getting out of the church thing for a while, because I found out it was kind of more of a cult at that point. So I left, and then I was just like, well, what am I going to do now? It's just like, start playing music again. And I was like, well, I could buy, I had a decent job at the time. I was like, I could buy a jet ski, or I could buy some music gear. And I was like, what should I do? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to buy, I still do faith, God. And I was just like, hey, talking to God when I was like, hey, I kind of want to do this music thing again. I go, if this is the direction I should go in, just lead it in that direction. I use this is, using your talents, That's when things really got interesting, strange. Shortly after that, I was living with my grandparents at the time in Roseville. I was looking for music gear. There was a friend of mine who lived there. His name was Otto Jensen, who's also a bass player. He played in bands throughout the years. We're hanging out, lived down the road from me, and I was working out in Madison Heights at the time. Come to find out, I'm to work one day, and I look, and I see his car in the next lot over. I was like, that's Otto's car. Well, it turns out he worked right next to me, which is really weird, too. Like, that's weird. So one day, lunchtime came around, and him and I went out to lunch, and I said, hey, man, I go, I'm looking to get some recording gear. Anybody that's selling some, 4-track recorder? He's like, I'll put my ear out. So like, all right. So anyways, a couple days later, I'm driving home, and then I see his car broke down on the side of the road. I was like, that's Otto's car, broke down the side of the road. So I pull up, and he's like, I recognize your car, so you broke down. Then he's like, hey, you were mentioning about looking for some gear. I got a guy's number, got some gear you might be interested in. I was like, oh, cool. So he gives me this guy's number, call this dude up, drive out there, pick up some gear from him. And before I leave that place, I go to that guy. I said, hey, do you know any guitar players play with like some effects and that kind of thing? Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. And I was like, oh, okay. So then this guy who we're about ear from gives me this guy's number, and I call guy Scott Lyon, guitar player, trying to get a hold of him, can't never get a hold of him, keep playing phone tag. And he was in the process of moving at the time, so he was just like, I caught him. I just so happened to catch him like perfect timing, because he was like, if I would have waited like another day or two, he would have been already moved out and wouldn't have got the phone call. So I caught him, and he's like, yeah, my buddy Derek gave me your phone number, said you're looking for a bass player. And so he's like, yeah, okay. He came over a couple days later and auditioned. He brought in some stuff that he was into, like he had some like Pink Floyd and some Over the Rhine CDs. A local band called Discipline, which is still around today, local prog band. He's like, this is kind of what I'm looking to do, what we're like. And I'm like, ooh, I like this. This is cool. So he's auditioning me for some of his stuff that he was writing, playing, and I'm thinking, I'm nervous as hell. And I'm thinking I bombed the audition. But I guess there was this one thing I did. It was like, I don't know what it was. Something I did on the bass that he really liked, and he thought it was really cool. And he was like, He's like, do you want to come out and jam with us? And I was like, yeah. So then got together with him and the drummer. The drummer was so like, they were just in their garage at the time jamming. He was so excited that within like a day, he had built a studio in his garage, because he was like,
cool.
Excited to have somebody come out and jam. He's like, oh, so the drummer built it up, and I got there, and I was like, oh, wow, this is really cool. Kind of crazy. And he did it like in a weekend or something like that, like a day or two. Yeah, and then we started jamming as a 3-piece, and we just jammed just instrumentally, just improvisations for months. I still got the tapes to this day. I got like hundreds of tapes, and just from that era. So then that band was going for a while, and then we found a singer. We auditioned a couple singers, and we found this one guy, and it turned out that, there was a connection between him and the guitar player years prior. So it was kind of like this weird serendipitous moment.
Mm-hmm.
So then that band went on for a while and played a lot of shows.
Was that Think?
Yeah. We don't have, I'm trying to get some stuff, a video up on YouTube. So then that band was going pretty good for quite a few years. We were kind of like a psychedelic band, kind of prog-ish psychedelic,
Mm-hmm.
A little more pop rock, but not really. It was like the early 90s. So then one day something happened that changed my existence. Back then I didn't, coming out of the church era, I didn't smoke weed or anything. I was,
Mm-hmm.
very straight-laced. And then one night decided like, let's try a little bit of that stuff, So we did. Then we went in the studio and jammed, and we played this one song, which was called The Magi, which was like our song that kind of birthed the rest of the path for the years to come after that. It was a little more on the heavier minor key. A lot of people were comparing us to Tool at the time, and I didn't even know who Tool was.
Right.
We're like, Tool? We're like, who's Tool? And I didn't even know who they were. That was kind of opened the door on that, strangely enough. I said, well, it happens with a lot of musicians. So that kind of changed, and then I got really into the psych thing after that, for obvious reasons. More so, I started delving into early Pink Floyd. My drummer at the time he had like a bunch of like old, just, bootleg and all this stuff, live Pink Floyd. And so I just was, get into that stuff, put the headphones on and just go into space, and it just huge influence. Then we played a show with this band called local band back in the 90s called Ebbling Hughes. They were a 2-piece psychedelic rock project with drums and keyboards. Just really crazy, fuzzed out, affected keyboards, kind of Emerson, Lake and Palmer kind of stuff, heavier, really cool. And we went and saw them because we were going to play a show with them a few months after that. And I saw those guys, and I was like, "What is this?" I go, this is it right here. I like this kind of stuff. So then I finally listened to their record one night. They had a landmark record, great record called The Little Bugs Glow. That record, it was just changed my life. Put that record on, and I was like, wow. It was like Pink Floyd and beyond. Very cool. It's just, kind of opened another, doorway of possibilities of like what you can do, especially with effects. That's when I really started delving into the effect aspect of things. Kind of how Blue Black Hour started. Right after around the year 2000, that's when my guitar player and I had a falling out, which was really just a misunderstanding. It was really kind of weird. We didn't talk for like 2 years. I thought band was over, everything was done, and I don't know what I was going to do at that point. And that was the era of my life I call living in the worm's nest, because it was a very strange time in my life. Yeah, it was just weird. It was just weird. And it was like right around the turn of the century. So 2 years went by and we didn't talk. And then one day there was like a chain of events that happened. I was living with this girl, and I moved out. And right around that, right just before that happened, my guitar player and I, this is back in 2000, just before 9/11, my guitar player and I reconnected again. And we started like getting together and like, just working, just getting together, jamming, with some loops and stuff. I'd play bass, he'd play guitar, and yeah, it was really cool. And then, like I said, right after that, that's when I moved out from my girlfriend's house, moved in this place, Pontiac. And the strange thing is, for years since the band, since Think started, we had this poster in the studio, and it was this poster, blacklight poster from like the 60s. And it's like Adam and Eve standing on top of a mountain with the sun and there's a waterfall. And it's like really cool, like total psychedelic, really awesome looking. Really strange. When I moved into my new place, I was going to look at, like, okay, let me check this room out. And I go upstairs, and that same poster was hanging on the wall, which is very weird. I was like, wait a second. It was almost like the universe was saying, you're back. Yeah, like it's back. And then, like, that's right when we started, my guitar player and I started playing music again. Took that as like a sign. Okay, this is it. We're back again. And that's when Blue Black Hour officially started. Yeah, we had a different drummer. We had several drummers, as a lot of bands in Detroit do, throughout the years. So yeah, that started. And we had the first incarnation of Blue Black Hours. We wrote some songs, played a few shows. That drummer left, then then our singer from Think came back as our drummer, which was interesting. That was kind of strange years later. And then I was singing. It was kind of bizarre. But it was really interesting because having him as our singer through the Think years taught me a lot about, just from listening to him and watching him and, all that kind of stuff. So that was really interesting how that ended up happening. He became our drummer. Then he couldn't do it anymore. So then we had this one guy, Jesse Wozniak, who actually recorded our first and second record, Blue Black Hours. So he was their drummer for a while. And that's when the band really started taking off. That was about 2004 is when it started. That ran till about 2010. We started playing shows around 2007. 2006, 2007, we started playing shows regularly out in Detroit, playing with different different Detroit bands. Started playing with a bunch of Detroit bands at the time, doing shows. And then Jesse left band in 2011. So then we're like, well, we got to find another drummer. Find another drummer. Somebody, who was Karen Neal. It was Karen Neal from Queen Bee.
Mm-hmm.
She suggested a drummer, girl drummer, Terry Bradley. And I was like, okay, let's give him a try. So he came out, then started writing and recording. Terry playing shows, and that was from about 2012 to about 2014, roughly. So yeah, that's a cool area. And that era, that's when we recorded the first record with Terry. And then around 2013, I think, Terry left, so we're looking for another drummer again. Well, at the time, I was kind of doing a little side gig with this dude who I met at this coffee shop, which is another serendipitous moment. Kind of doing, well, I guess you can say it now, but selling a little bit of the green on the side back then. Yeah, I was doing that, and I was one guy, he owned like this coffee shop or whatever it was, and I'd never go in really. Just he'd meet me in the parking lot. And one night I decided just to go in. And I was like, I'm gonna go in. And there was this dude, they were kind of jamming, this guy on drums, and I was just like, hey, you want to jam real quick? And he's like, yeah, all right. So then him and I started jamming, and we had an instant connection. So like, I was like, all right. And he felt it too. Like he knew it. He was like, this is the dude. So we exchanged numbers. We started getting together and just improv it. This was like a little side thing we called it Wolves and Spiral. And it was just play drums and I'd play guitar, but I'd play my guitar through my bass amp, and I'd have all my effects hooked up, everything. And then we'd just go to town. We'd just get lost. We'd get ready, just go for like, 20 minutes, hour, whatever it was, and record everything. So yeah, that was started happening. So right when Terry left, we were looking for a drummer, and go to my guitar player. I go, well, this is this dude I've been jamming with. Why don't we try him out? So we tried him out. It seemed to be really good chemistry. We started writing with him. Some of the songs I actually did with Blue Black Hours, that's on that second record, was a result of jams that him and I had with our little side gig, Wolves and Spiral.
Right.
Some of the riffs, but we developed them into songs. So yeah, then, so we got together in 2013, and we started playing some shows, and then we went to the studio, and then our old drummer, who was our original drummer for Blowback Hours, recorded our second record too, and that was a very strange occurrence. First day in the studio, we're in a schoolhouse in Detroit, and there's a lot of cool bands recorded there.
The album you did that, like I said, the first thing I heard from you, of course, was Piercing the Veil. Awesome. Right from the start, I just love Space Lightning.
Right on.
Yeah, I mean, I love all of it. It's really funny because...
that's the first song we ever wrote.
My question to you as far as that is this: where exactly, as far as these songs and the lyrics for these songs, where do they come from? I mean, you mentioned some of these bands you were into, but were there certain things in art or anything that's relatable as far as your life that you wrote into these songs that, that relate to the songs?
Yeah, it's funny because lyric writing is the hardest thing for me. And the reason why is because, one of the reasons why is because when I write, I usually come up, it's always about the music first.
Sure.
And, song structures are always written first with no melody in mind for lyrics or vocal melody or lyrics. And so then I'll start coming up with vocal melodies, and they're usually just, nonsense or just like la la la, whatever,
right,
just to get the melody on. So then I'll record the scratch track of the melodies over the music, and then it's like, okay, now I gotta make words fit over this, and it's some sort of storyline, or sometimes things are written abstract where it's like it just creates an image or a picture in your mind, and it can mean whatever you want to mean. But yeah, primarily a lot of my lyrics always tend to have some sort of speaking of truth in some way about life, or inspiration. And a lot of times, like, I'll be singing lyrics that are uplifting or inspirational, but then those lyrics will inspire me. It's kind of like, okay, it's like, boy, sometimes I feel like hypocritical because I don't live up to my own lyrics sometimes. Like, I need to do better. One interesting thing, which was really wild, another serendipitous moment, was the song Spiders, which is on our second record. I was finishing the lyrics for that when I was in the basement and writing the lyrics, and I just finished, put my pen down, and I was like, that one's done. And, the song is called Spiders, and one of the lyrics is, and when the spiders fall from the sky, don't be afraid, it's just illusions in your mind. done writing the last line of the lyric, kid you not, set my pen down, and all of a sudden a spider came right down on a web right in front of my face and dangled there. And I was like, okay, I guess that's a wrap.
Blue black hours refers to the hours of between day and night that have something
Yes.
to do with that.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing because we were looking for a name of the band. And, we were called Zoe at the time, and we were like, it's all right, you know. And then we were kind of will-o'-the-wisp for a minute. And then one day, my guitar player, found this thing online. Can't even find it anymore. Like I tried to look, and it's like just gone. Back in the '90s, and there was a little short film called Blue Black Hours. It was really interesting. It was just like really thought-provocative, and it was about the time, the things that happen between sunset and sunrise. And we were always up late. I still am up late. You know, I work nights, so I'm always, this is like my, midday right now. Our studio had no windows, and so we would be hanging out, go outside, and the sun's up already. We're like, oh wow, we're like living in that time between the times,
Right,
the sunset, and sunrise, And I always found those moments of sunset and sunrise to be like the most like sacred moments. Something about that. I love the way the sun looks at that, the world looks, and just everything. There's something just really special about that. And so he was like, what about we call the band Blue Black Hours? And I was like, ooh, I like it. So then that's how we came up with the name Blue Black Hours.
That's a really, really cool name, really unique name as far as that. Is the band still together? Is there a form of Blue Black Hours? So is the band defunct? Are you trying to revitalize it some way? What's up with the band?
I mean, it's still there. The guitar player moved to Boston back in 2020. Kind of a high point. I mean, everything kind of, it was weird because our last show that we did was in 2019, and we got to play with Monster Magnet, which was at the Emerald Theater. Excited after that. I'm like, okay. The response we got was really cool. It was like, we played out there, and we went on at like 11:30 or something like that, and I'm thinking like, oh, no one's going to be here, and, stepping on stage, there was a lot of people there. I was like, whoa, okay. I'm looking out, and like, I don't know anybody. Like a couple people I knew, but I was just like, okay, so this is like people that don't even know us at all. Let's do what we do. The response was really good, and I was really excited after that. I was on fire, like, all right, this is good. And then COVID happened, and then my guitar player, his kids live in Boston, and he lost his job here, and he ended up getting a job out in Boston. So, plus to be with his kids and whatnot. So he moved out there in 2020. So during the pandemic, which was kind of a blessing in disguise, I was like, well, what am I going to do? To keep writing songs for the band. And I'll just play all the instruments, and kind of how it usually goes. It's like when we write, pretty much I come up with the ideas, sit down with a guitar player, and or sometimes we'll just be jamming and he'll have a riff, and I'm like, ooh, what is that? Like work something out of it, or I'd say the majority of the music, I pretty much structure together for the most part and come up with the riffs and the ideas.
Well, anyway, man, I'm going to let you go. Just like I said, I really enjoy your music. Hopefully you can continue with that. Like I said, get out there and maybe, in one way or another with somebody or a new band or whatever, perform some of this stuff. But if not, at least, recording, because that's really cool too. You keep recording out, keep listening, let's just say.
Sounds great.
All right, man. Well, you have a good night. Like I say, it's been great talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you very much.
All right, brother. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that was John Spurrier, bassist and lead vocalist for the really cool psychedelic prog band Blue Black Hours. Just a really cool mix of old school prog, old school psychedelic. If you haven't heard of these guys, you really need to check them out. You can check their music out on Spotify, probably all the other music services also. And they've got several cool videos on YouTube. Hopefully they'll get some new music out in the near future. This is a band you really need to check out live, and I just can't say enough good stuff about it. Stereo system yours still giving you the blues? Maybe the receiver has a blown channel, or the turntable just doesn't work right. Well, then you should visit my friends at 7 Grand Audio Service. They've been in business for over 40 years, located at 25642 7 Mile Road in North Redford. The owner Dash and his assistant Harry can fix just about anything. Receivers, tape decks, turntables, EQs, power amps, and yet guitar and bass amp. The phone number over there is 313-533-3635. They're open Monday through Friday, 10 to 6. Check them out and tell them Jimmy sent you. Anyway, with that being said, as I like to say, keep rocking.